I swear, if I have to stop one more time today, Nora snapped, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. The dashboard blinked red. Low fuel. Again. The baby stirred in the back seat, a soft whimper breaking through the static on the radio. The storm was building behind her, black clouds chasing the sedan down the lonely stretch of Highway 23. She'd been on the road for nearly 7 hours, trying to outrun more than just weather, trying to outrun silence, memories, and the house she'd left behind this morning, keys still swinging in the door. She almost missed it. The gas station looked abandoned from a distance, sun-bleached signs, a sagging canopy, weeds clawing at the edge of the asphalt, but the pumps were still upright, and the flickering open sign hung crooked behind the dirty glass door. She sighed, easing off the highway. 10 minutes, she muttered, as the car rolled into the gravel lot. Something strange caught her eye. It was the stillness that struck her first. Not the wind, not the broken glass near the old freezer unit, not the rusting soda machine. It was him. A dog medium-sized, golden brown with a thick, dusty coat and ribs just beginning to show, sitting dead still near pump 3. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the gas pump, unmoving, like it owed him something. Nora slowed the car. To a crawl, her hazard lights blinked. She turned down the radio. The dog didn't move. "Is that dog waiting?" she whispered, her voice catching. She parked but didn't get out. Instead, she watched. Minutes passed. A semi thundered by in the distance. The dog never flinched. His ears were forward, his gaze locked on the rusted pump like it was a doorway. Not once did he glance her way. Nora opened the door slowly. The wind bit at her coat. "Hey," she called gently. Still. The dog didn't move. Then, just as she stepped out and took a breath of that cold, diesel-tainted air, the glass door of the station creaked open. A man with a faded mechanic's shirt and a limp stepped out. He paused, then looked at her car, then the dog. His face tightened. "You shouldn't talk to that one," he muttered. Nora turned. "Excuse me." The man wiped his hands on a rag, his eyes narrowing. "That dog's been sitting there 3 days. Same spot. Doesn't bark, doesn't beg, just stares." Nora looked back at the dog. There was something eerie about it. Something more than just patience. Devotion, maybe, or grief. "Whose is he?" The man shrugged. "Used to come in with a trucker. Long haul, big guy, quiet. Always used pump 3. Last week the guy left without him. Left him. More like never came back." His voice dipped lower. "They say there was a wreck up near the pass. Jackknifed rig. Fire took everything." Nora didn't respond. She stood in silence, the baby's soft breathing behind her, the dog's stillness in front of her, the wind shifting stories between them. The man leaned against the doorframe. "Thing is, dog showed up the next morning. Just walked down the highway like he knew. Been there ever since." Nora took a step closer. The dog didn't growl, didn't twitch, didn't even blink. She crouched. "Hey boy," she whispered. This time the dog's ear twitched, and for the first time, his head turned slowly, eyes meeting hers. What she saw in them wasn't fear or hunger. It was a kind of waiting that hurt to witness, like he'd made a promise, and he was keeping it no matter what behind her. The wind kicked up a loose flyer from the station door. It spun past her, feet before catching against her tire. She picked it up. A missing poster. Not for a person. For a dog. The photo was old, taken months ago, but the name was still clear. Milo. And beneath it, a line that read, "If found, please call. Truck. Driver's best friend. Last seen at pump 3." Nora stood still, the flyer trembling in her hands. She looked back at the dog, then at her car, then at the road behind her. This wasn't her story, but it might be her choice now. And the baby behind her, wide awake now and staring out the window, gurgled softly like she too understood that something unseen had just shifted. Nora stepped forward again. This time, Milo didn't look away. Nora didn't sleep that night. She'd driven another 20 miles before the guilt caught up with her, settling in her chest like a stone that wouldn't shift. She tried to shake it off. She told herself it wasn't her problem, that the dog probably belonged to someone, that someone else, someone local, would handle it, but none of it felt true. Not after she'd looked into Milo's eyes. In the silence of the motel room, with her daughter cradled beside her and the steady hum of the air conditioning filling the space like static, Nora kept replaying the way he sat, like he knew that gas pump might somehow deliver back the person he'd lost. There was a kind of patience in him that wasn't natural. It came from love, or grief, or something in between. By morning, she was back on Highway 23. The gas station appeared through the rising heat like a mirage, still half collapsed, still holding on. She pulled in quietly. Pump 3 was still occupied. Milo was there, same position, as though he hadn't moved all night. But something had changed. He was watching her this time. He didn't get up, but his eyes tracked the car as she parked. A recognition, not trust yet, but something close. She stepped out and opened the back door, lifting her daughter gently from the car seat. The wind had picked up again. Dry arpeggiated as she walked toward Milo. The baby made a small noise, something between a coo and a giggle, and for the first time, Milo stirred. His ears twitched, then lowered slightly. He didn't move away. His head tilted. Then he stood slowly, stiffly, and took 2 small steps forward. Nora stopped. Milo sniffed the air. eyes never leaving the baby in her arms. The door to the station creaked open behind her. "The mechanic again, you came back." She nodded. "He hasn't eaten." The man shook his head. "Put food out. He won't touch it. Just sits there. Like he's waiting for a command that never comes." Nora looked down. Her daughter squirmed in her arms, reaching a tiny hand toward Milo, who was now only a foot away. He didn't back up. He just sat again, closer this time, watching. "Is there anything left of the driver?" she asked softly. The man exhaled through his nose, then stepped back inside. A moment later he returned with a box, small, worn, dented at the edges. He held it out like it weighed more than it should. "Someone from the wreck crew brought this in. Found it on the shoulder. Said the dog had been lying next to it." Nora took it carefully. It was heavier than it looked. Inside, a trucker's logbook, water damage but legible. A set of keys, a photo creased at the corners of a man and a dog. Milo, unmistakably younger, behind them, a silver rig, and underneath it all, a folded child's blanket, blue, soft, printed with stars. Nora didn't understand at first. Then she saw the writing. The man's handwriting on the back of the photo. "For Emma, when she's old enough. Tell her we watched the stars together." She stared at it, her breath catching. The driver had a daughter, or was meant to. Maybe a niece, maybe something more. But Milo wasn't just waiting for an owner. He was guarding something left behind. She sank down beside him. The dog leaned forward, nose brushing the box gently. Then he lowered his head to the pavement, touching it to the edge like it was sacred. The moment was quiet. No cars passed. No birds called. Just the three of them, breathing together in the stillness of that broken station. "I can't leave him here," Nora whispered. The mechanic didn't argue. He just nodded, then turned and walked back inside without another word. The drive back was slow. Milo sat in the front seat, curled tightly, the box between his paws. He didn't whine, he didn't bark. He just kept his eyes forward, occasionally glancing back at the baby behind them. Something in him softened each time he looked. In the following days, Milo wouldn't eat unless she fed him by hand. He slept near the crib, his back always to the door. When the baby cried, he was there before Nora was. When she laughed, he wagged his tail once, just once, like a memory flickering through him. It wasn't until the third night that he did something Nora hadn't expected. He walked to the corner of the living room where she'd left the trucker's box and poured it gently. She opened it again. The photo, the keys, the blanket. Milo sniffed it all, then turned to her and waited, and it hit her. Then he didn't just want to remember. He wanted her to know. There was something left unfinished, a promise buried in the silence. And Nora, holding her daughter and the photo of a man who never made it home, realized she wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was part of whatever came next. By the end of the week, Milo had learned the baby's name, or at least, that's how it felt. Every time Nora whispered Kala, he lifted his ears and watched the child with something deeper than recognition, as if he had known her in another life, as if he was guarding a piece of something too fragile to name. But it wasn't enough. He still woke at 3:12 a.m. every morning, rising from his spot by the crib, padding to the front door and sitting waiting, just like he did at Pump 3. Nora tried once to stop him, calling him back with a soft voice and a treat in hand. He looked at her, held her gaze for a long, long moment, and then turned back to the door. Not in disobedience, but in duty. She stopped trying after that. 2 days later, while folding laundry, she found the logbook again. She hadn't noticed it before, not in the rush of that strange, emotional day at the gas station. But now, with Kala napping and Milo at his post, she opened it carefully and traced the driver's loops and scrolls. The man's name was handwritten on the first page. Douglas Wren. Page after page listed delivery routes, freight codes, fuel, logs, and then, something strange toward the end, the entries turned personal. Notes to himself, maybe, memories in the margins. One stood out. Last pass through Hollow Ridge. Don't forget the promise. Nora frowned. She checked the map on her phone. Hollow Ridge wasn't on any major trucking route. It was a barely marked sliver between two counties in the Appalachian Hills. She wouldn't have thought twice about it, except Milo was suddenly at her side, tail still, ears locked forward, eyes on the open logbook. "You know that place, don't you?" she whispered. He sat down slowly, like an answer. Later that evening, she called the number on the back of the missing poster. It rang 4 times before disconnecting. No voicemail, no name, no chance to leave a message. Just silence, but that was enough. The next morning, she packed the car again. It wasn't like the first time. This wasn't running away. This was returning something. Maybe someone. She strapped Kala into her car seat, placed the logbook and the truck keys beside her, and opened the passenger door. Milo didn't hesitate. He jumped in like he had done it before, curled tight, resting his head on the edge of the center console. They drove north for hours. The hills rose around them slowly, swallowing the sky with layers of green and shadow. As they climbed higher, the towns grew smaller, fewer signs, fewer names. But Milo began to stir, first with a low whine, then with a bark that startled Kala from her nap. He rose in the seat, pawing lightly at the window. Where? Nora murmured, scanning the tree line. And then she saw it, a narrow gravel path breaking off from the road, half covered in brush. No markings, no signs, just an old rusted mailbox, bent and leaning sideways, with the words Hollow Ridge carved in hand-painted white across the top. She turned in slowly. The car rocked over uneven stones and winding roots. Calla gurgled softly in the back, unaware of the tightening grip on Nora's steering wheel. Milo didn't move. He sat tall now, alert, watching. After a mile, the path opened into a clearing. At the far end, a small cabin leaned into the hillside. It wasn't abandoned. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney. A dog bowl sat on the porch. A wind chime rattled lazily in the breeze. Nora stepped out, heart pounding. She didn't call out. She didn't need to. The door creaked open before her. Foot touched the porch. A woman stood there, late 50s, wind-tired eyes, graying braid over one shoulder. She didn't look surprised. She looked like she'd been waiting. Her eyes went straight to Milo. He stepped forward once, twice, then stopped. The woman knelt down. Oh, sweetheart, you found her, didn't you? Nora froze. Found who? The woman looked up, her voice cracked. Douglas's girl. He used to talk about her, not his, but his brother's. Said if anything ever happened, the baby was the only thing that mattered. That doggy wouldn't leave her side. He said Milo knew who mattered. Nora stepped back, breath hitching. He died in that wreck, didn't he? The woman asked. Nora nodded. But the dog? He came back to the pump. The woman closed her eyes, swallowed hard. Douglas drove through here every month. He never said where he was going. Just that he had to check. That he made a promise after his brother and sister-in-law passed. That one day, when the baby was born, he'd come for her. Nora looked back at her car. Calla was awake now, watching them. The woman stepped down from the porch, moved to the open door, and looked in. She didn't cry. She just placed a hand on her chest and breathed in deep. My God. She looks just like her mother. Milo circled the car once, then sat down beside the door like he'd completed the longest mission of his life. Nora didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. This wasn't a chance encounter. This wasn't fate playing its tricks. This was a dog fulfilling a promise a man couldn't. And in that moment, between the wind and the rustling trees, between the mountain's breath and the baby's quiet gaze, Nora realized she hadn't been running from her life. She'd been driving straight into someone else's that night. Nora stayed in the cabin. It wasn't planned. Nothing about this journey had been. But the woman, her name was Lyle, short for Lily Norford. Her the spare room with the kind of quiet insistence that made refusal feel wrong. Nora had been running too long, through towns and memories, through the remains of a life she hadn't meant to lose. But now, something had caught up with her. Or maybe she had caught up to it. Calla fell asleep fast, bundled in blankets that smelled like cedar and wood smoke. Milo didn't move from her side. His breathing was slower now, at peace, but something still flickered behind his eyes, something unfinished. Lyle brewed tea on the old stovetop and lit a kerosene lamp that filled the room with warm amber light. Nora sat at the edge of the worn sofa, her hand still trembling slightly. She hadn't cried, not yet, but her chest was hollow in that familiar way, like something had been taken from her long before she realized it was hers. Lyle watched her from the kitchen, then disappeared briefly into a back room. She returned with a tin box, faded green metal latch, rust at the corners. She set it down between them and slid it forward. This came months ago, she said. Douglas sent it by freight. No note, just this address on the bottom. I figured it was for safekeeping. Never opened it. Nora stared at it. He never told you about the baby? She asked. Voice low. Lyle shook her head. Only that he owed someone a debt he could never repay. Something about a fire. A bad one. His brother and wife didn't make it, but someone else had taken the baby in. A woman alone, I think. No name. He said she was kind, and tired, and too proud to ask for help. So he watched from afar. Every few months he'd vanish for a day or two. Said he was just checking. That if something ever happened to her, he had to know where the child was. Nora felt her breath catch that woman. It had been her. She had always thought the occasional fuel vouchers, the envelope with no return address that covered a month of groceries, were freak coincidences. She'd never asked questions. Just accepted the small mercies that arrived when things grew hardest. And now, hearing it out loud, the truth unspooled like thread across the floor. Douglas had been there, watching, not in the shadows, not with control but with reverence, with duty, with a kind of love that outlasted blood. Lyle unlatched the box. Inside were three things: a folded piece of paper, a toy truck metal well-worn, dented at the edges like it had seen years of rough play, and a smaller photo newer than the one Milo had carried. A blurry picture of Nora standing outside her old apartment, holding Calla in one arm, a grocery bag in the other. Milo was just barely visible in the background, peeking from behind a car. Nora picked it up, heart thudding. He was watching, she whispered. Lyle nodded. And he trusted you. Nora unfolded the paper slowly. The ink had faded slightly, but the handwriting was steady. Lyle, if this gets to you, it means something's gone wrong. I've taken too many risks on these mountain roads, and too many nights pretending I'm not getting older. But if anything happens, please keep this safe for her. Her name is Kala. She'll be small, she may be scared, but she's the last good thing my brother left behind." The woman raising her, she doesn't know me, but she's done right by that child. I've seen it. I've seen enough to know I'd trust her with anything I had left. Milo knows. He always knows. Tell the girl this isn't a burden. It's a gift, and tell her thank you for everything she didn't know she was doing. I'll see you both again one day if there's any justice in this world. Douglas. Nora didn't cry. Not then. She just folded the letter carefully and held it in both hands, like it might dissolve if she let go. Across the room, Milo lifted his head, eyes meeting hers in the half-light. He hadn't just been a guardian, he had been a messenger, a bridge between what was lost and what still remained. And now that his mission was done, he seemed older somehow, tired, but no longer burdened. That night, long after Lyle had gone to bed and the moon had slid behind the ridge, Nora sat on the porch steps with Milo at her feet. The mountains were still, the kind of still that only comes after something sacred passes through. She thought of all the miles she had driven, all the nights she had spent convincing herself she was failing. She thought of Douglas, the stranger who had left trails of kindness with no expectation of being seen. And she thought of Milo, who had waited for weeks at a rusted pump for a face that would never return, because he believed promises mattered more than pain. The wind shifted. Milo raised his head and stared into the trees like he was listening to something Nora couldn't hear. She didn't ask what it was. Some things didn't need explaining. She just reached down and placed her hand on his back, warm and steady. "You can rest now," she whispered. But in her heart, she knew it wasn't rest he wanted. Not yet. There was still one more road waiting ahead, one more thread left to follow, and by dawn they would be driving again. The morning air in the mountains had a stillness that made it feel sacred, not quiet, but deeply paused, like the trees and earth were listening. When Nora opened the cabin door, Milo was already awake. He sat at the edge of the porch, facing the road below, alert but calm. Kala was stirring in her arms, drowsy with sleep, her small hand curled in Nora's sweater. Something about the morning felt final, though she couldn't say why. She just knew they weren't meant to stay here not. Yet Lyle made breakfast, and they ate in the kitchen with the windows open to the hills. No one spoke much. It wasn't silence from discomfort, it was the kind of silence that forms when something is understood without needing to be spoken. Before they left, Lyle pressed the tin box into Nora's hands again. "You'll know when it's time," she said, and kissed Kala's forehead. The drive down the ridge was slow. The gravel road twisted and sighed beneath the tires. Milo didn't rest this time. He sat upright, head out the window, nose twitching with memory. For the first time in days, Nora didn't feel uncertain about the road ahead. It was like something had shifted, like Milo was leading her now, not just following. The map said the town was gone, burnt out decades ago in a wildfire, the kind that devours not just homes but entire histories. But the logbook had one more note. Scribbled between the fuel entries and route tallies was a phrase circled twice. March 5th, Ash Creek Crossing. Leave it there. That was today. Ash Creek wasn't a town anymore. It was barely a name on a gravel fork between two hills. But when they reached the clearing, Milo sat up taller. His tail gave one slow, deliberate wag. Nora pulled the car over. A wooden post stood crooked near the edge of the road, blackened from fire long ago. Behind it, the remnants of an old stone wall curved around a meadow gone wild with grass and silence. Milo leaped out before she opened the door. Not running, just walking steadily forward, toward a patch of earth beneath a white oak that still stood tall, somehow untouched. He paused there, waited, and Nora knew. She brought the tin box and Kala, walking slowly over the brittle grass, the wind gentle against her face. Milo turned and looked at her once, then back at the ground, then sat. She knelt beside him and opened the box for the last time. Inside, she placed the photo of Douglas and Milo, the dented toy truck, the letter, and finally, the small blanket with the stars. She hadn't understood it at first why Douglas had included something so simple. But now, as the morning light filtered through the leaves, she realized it wasn't for Kala, it was for Milo, a reminder of the child he had guarded, and the nights he had watched her sleep. She set the box gently against the tree roots and leaned her forehead to the bark. "I think this is where he meant for it to go," she said softly. Milo didn't move, but when she stepped back, he lay down beside the box, pressing his body close to the earth, as though anchoring himself there. Not to stay, but to let something go. Kala babbled quietly in her arms, and then something small, nearly invisible, happened. A breeze moved through the grass in a slow arc, lifting the edges of the blanket. The wind touched Milo's fur, and for a moment it felt like someone else was there, unseen, not haunting, not eerie, just present, like a man watching from the edges of memory, saying thank you, the only way he could. Milo stood. One last time. He walked back to the car without a sound. When they drove away, Nora didn't look in the rearview mirror. She didn't need to. What had been carried there, what had been laid down, was not a goodbye, it was a passing on, a turning of the page. In the weeks that followed, Milo changed. He didn't wait at doors anymore. He no longer woke in the middle of the night. Instead, he followed Kala everywhere she went, sometimes walking half a step behind her like a sentry, other times curling beside her on the rug as she napped. He still watched the world like it was full of things only he could see. But now, there was peace behind his eyes. Nora wrote Lyle a letter every Sunday. She never asked for more details about Douglas. Some truths, she'd learned, were better held in gestures than words. But one day, months later, a package arrived. Inside was a copy of an old photo. Douglas and his brother's boys, sitting on the tailgate of a truck, both holding sticks like rifles and laughing. Behind them, a golden retriever puppy with ears too big for his head on the back. Lyle had written in ink beginning to fade, "Milo's mother." You guess it ran in the family. That evening, Nora framed the photo and placed it on the wall above Calla's crib. Not for memory, for legacy. Years later, when Calla asked about the dog who never left her side, Nora would tell her the story. Not just about the gas station or the mountain road. She would tell her about promises kept, about a man she never met who loved her from afar, and about the dog who crossed counties and months of waiting to deliver a message in silence. And when Calla would reach down to hug Milo, rhyme Oz, and slow-moving but still loyal as ever, Nora would smile, because some stories don't end. They live on in the space between what was lost and what was loved, and in the hearts of those who choose, again and again, not to look away.